Welcome to the JD Power Insurance Intelligence Podcast. I'm Michael of Vermillion with JD Power, and with me today are Craig Martin from JD Power. Craig, welcome.
Hey, Mike. Good to see you.
Also, Mark Garrett joining us from JD Power. Mark, good to see you.
Yep, yeah, you too, Mike.
And then also Steve Crutzen from JD Power. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Mike. Happy to be here.
So the topic for today's podcast is AI. And the reason we're talking about it today is that JD Power went out and talked to consumers about their this would be insurance consumers about their perception of AI. This is an important topic for the industry because it's a big focus area for business, and also consumers are very aware of it. So, Craig, thank you for leading this effort and this study. So to kind of dive into in terms of what we found, what were some of the big headlines?
Yeah, and certainly thanks to the team for all their efforts. Again, as always, this is a group effort to make sure that we're asking the right questions. A couple of things really stood out. So at a high level, as we think about usage, a lot of folks are using AI. 75% of the consumers we surveyed said that they've used AI tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, and others. So again, the bulk of respondents say they're using these tools, and almost shockingly, more than 1 in 3 say they use one daily. So these are becoming quickly part of everyday life. Now, we did also ask about shopping in the insurance space, which this one produced some pretty interesting results. Which 40% are using it for as part of their shopping process. So you think about a couple of years ago, you might be Googling who's the best in insurance, or you're kind of out there looking and doing your own search and kind of wading through. There's a lot of implications if I quickly go to ChatGPT and go, who's the best insurer in my marketplace, and these are my priorities, and it's quickly coming up. And not only that, they seem to be having a lot of faith in what's coming out of that, so that they're in many ways confident that what's coming out, and at least to a degree, is useful and valuable information. So there's a lot of kind of thought that needs to go into what is AI going to do now and in the future, because it's coming fast, and it's getting usage whether you know it or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess my question would be: Is AI kind of replacing search when it comes to consumers shopping for car insurance, for example? But I don't know that you actually have a lot of choice, right? If you go to Google, Google is essentially putting AI kind of at the top of the search results, and so you're almost kind of using AI whether you want to or not, right?
Yeah, and certainly I'll have others comment on this, but yeah, obviously that is the experience these days. If you're Googling things, no longer is it, you have to wade through results. It starts off with an AI driven answer that you can kind of choose to go deeper on. So you have to almost opt out. And again, human behavior would tell us that, the opt in versus opt out choice is a big factor in, how you're going to leverage that content or that tool. And the fact that you automatically get it kind of forces you into it, or at least kind of leads you quickly into that answer of, hey, AI is helping me out, there's some information that's valuable to me.
Okay,
So
so a large percent of consumers are using AI. Um, Many of them on a daily basis. Many of them are using AI for shopping for insurance. Uh, but we asked some other questions in the survey, right? In the research that we did when we talked to consumers, just in terms. Why don't we start with some of their concerns with AI? What are consumers worried about?
really, at the highest level is kind of what's in it for me. If you think about, AI is coming, but a lot of the key questions that consumers ask is, what's the benefit? They know that brands are going to use it. They know it's coming. It's going to have applications. But what do they think is going to happen? And I think there's really this idea of trust, transparency, and kind of responsible use. And that really boils down to, like any technology, and Steve has said this many times, which is a great point, which is like, I'm not focused on the technology. It's what do I get in return? What's the benefit to me? We've seen this in research time and again is, I'm not, I'll think about the technology, but I'm really focused on what's in it for me. What's the benefit to me? Are you saving me money? Are you saving me time? And so, and who's getting the benefit? And I think that's what some of the questions we asked are showing that right now the consumer doesn't think they're getting much of the benefit, or they won't get much of the benefit. So that's really the key question of, as an insurer, and when that carrier starts to use AI, what's in it for me? What do I get out of it?
Yeah. Hey, just an interesting point maybe to add to that would be that was one of those questions that we saw a pretty meaningful shift in the data when we cut it by the age of the respondent, right? So an older cohort who, let's just say, maybe less likely to use some of these AI tools. They're not the early adopters getting in. They're not having the high incidence of that daily usage. We found they were much more likely to say that the carrier is going to benefit most out of the application of AI. Right. So that idea of, basically all respondents kind of skewed to it's going to help the insured a little bit more. So what we were looking for is more favorable if they said it was equal, right? Realizing that they're going to get some benefit as well. And that's where there was a kind of a huge shift. It was almost a third of people, if you were under 30, gave it that equilibrium where like, hey, I'm benefiting from this, right? I'm using AI. I see a benefit to me. But what we found was that it skewed all the way down to the low 20% if it was an older cohort. So a pretty sizable shift there in terms of where they see that benefit coming.
Yeah, and I think if you're a little bit future looking, as consumers use it more, to Mark's point, different demographics are using it more than others right now, but as consumers use it more, are we going to find ourselves arriving at a point where consumers are using it more than the insurer themselves to answer questions about their policy, their coverages, how a claim will unfold? What are the right coverages for them? Are we going to start seeing that consumers are trusting that and using that as much or more than an insurer's own people or an insurer's own technology to know about their policy? Because our research has shown for decades that consumers really don't understand their policies that well, and many of them are looking for help at understanding it better. So I think that's part of what very soon might become what's in it for the customer is I'm getting better answers from AI about my policy, my coverages, a claim than I'm getting from the insurer themselves.
Well, Steve, I think it's probably a good segue to another area that we explored in the research. And Craig, we talked to consumers about their point of view in terms of where they feel comfortable using AI and their relationship with their insurance carrier, and where they don't feel comfortable. So, what did we find there?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key headlines is, it's all about positioning and how it's phrased and how it's presented. So billing is an area where, help me understand. And again, I think people are starting to get used to this idea of recommendations of, hey, by the way, an early notification, your bill is coming due. So have you paid your bill? Here are the options to pay. And so it's, that AI driven kind of notification awareness raising smart billing suggestions that prompt people to the benefits. So I think AI is generally viewed that way as positive. We're starting to see that chat bot become kind of a piece of the puzzle. Whereas, I've got something simple. I've got a basic question. I can do it on my own, but then maybe it's a little more complex. And AI is able to rapidly kind of process some information and give me a quick answer. So I don't have to go out, I have a question about kind of the details of my policy or something about payment options. I can do a quick, I can ask the AI tool to find that information for me and bring it back, rather than the old way, which is I had to kind of go navigate and find it myself. And then I had to interpret it. So I think more and more, again, the power of a lot of these large language models is I can ask it to go bring that information back rather than me taking the time to search. So there's a lot of benefit in that way. I think this is a lot what, Mark and Steve were just talking about. As I become more comfortable with those tools, they're used to what's capable and possible other places, so they start to expect it here. And that's in the end, I get happy because I expect that tool to, like my Google search does this. Why doesn't that happen when I go to search for something on my carrier site? Why can't they give me that information? Why can't they quickly summarize the big key changes in my billing statement? So I think that saving time and saving effort, we see that, again, some quick hits and kind of a comfort level in those areas that seem to drive that confidence. You're helping me. They can quickly connect the dots of what's helpful to me and what's beneficial to me, that's where we really see some benefit AI short term coming from the client's perspective.
Yeah, maybe a point I'd add to that was one thing that we really saw interesting in the data was we asked customers that if they've had a claim before. Because we see AI, we see automated responses, right? We see AI and kind of the digitization of some of those processes really becoming a integral part of the claim experience. So I think that's where often customers have exposure to it. So one thing that was really interesting is we looked at those comfort questions. How comfort are you in AI being used in these different elements of the insurance experience? And I mean, they went up 2-3-fold once a customer had a claim. Like that comfort level, they said they were totally comfortable with everything we asked, even, pricing a policy. We even added some things that would maybe be a little more controversial, like, approving an insurance claim was one of the questions. We figured, okay, that's, of course, people are not going to be comfortable with that. But if they went through a claim process, it was like 40% of the customers said, you know what, I'm okay with this experience. They said they were comfortable with it helping manage the claim, right? So that to me, it's the almost takeaway there is like exposure to this, seeing the benefits, seeing it in use created a comfort where, of course, if we isolate the group that's never had a claim, I mean, that's where we saw a lot of those responses of, I don't want it pricing my policy. I don't want it, involved in making decisions around claims. That's where we saw a lot of those very uncomfortable type percentages. But that was really interesting where, that exposure to it through a claim really shifted the mindset.
Yeah. And I think that, again, it just comes back to that comfort level and that kind of recognition of what does it actually mean? So, AI is this broad term and it can mean a million different things. And that's part of the challenge is what are we really talking about? What does the consumer think and how does that translate? And as we look at something like a claim, we have this debate internally is, if you if you automatically deny me and tell me no with AI, I hate it. It's terrible because that's a bad result for me and you've not given me it. But if I was auto approved and you give me money, immediately, wow, that's awesome. So I'm so happy. I mean, again, that whole idea of how does it impact the consumer? What's the benefit to them is such a critical kind of dynamic. And how do you communicate, let's make it faster. Let's make it easier. You didn't, AI allowed you to not have to enter in all this information. It didn't, it allowed us you called up on the phone and I knew who you were. I knew you have a claim. I know you have all this information. We've talked about this before on other calls. You know me, it's personalized, and then I'm getting quicker answers, faster answers with less effort. That's the holy grail from the customer standpoint. So it's all about the real world application and then what's the impact and meaning to their life. I mean, that's really, I don't think the average consumer cares if you have AI, in truth, as much as they care how it impacts them. And, if you're raising prices, if you're going to, if my policy price goes up, I'm not really happy no matter who chose to do that to me. If a computer did, or if that person in the back room did.
All right. So just to wrap up then, this would be for all three of you. We talked about how insurance consumers are using AI today. We talked about their areas of concern when it comes to the use of AI in their relationship with their insurance carrier. And then we talked about the different use cases where it appears that consumers are more comfortable in some cases than other cases where AI comes to play. So what is the call to action here for the carriers kind of across all three of those areas?
Well, I'd say, a call to action, particularly maybe in the claim space, would be, addressing, I'd say, the biggest need or the biggest benefit where customers see where they could benefit most from AI. So we asked a question just to give some background, some context to this. We gave them a list of maybe like 7 or 8 items and kind of rank order, where do you see the biggest benefit to you of how AI could help a claim experience? And the number one response across all the comparison points, right? Have you had a claim, your age group? People just wanted 24/7, access to information, self-service tools. Like that's where they see AI having the biggest benefit, is this idea of like transparency, communication, letting me see what's going on, let me self-serve and get access to this and see what's happening. That was the number one benefit people saw, even above speed of like getting through the claim experience. It's like, I want better access to information. So to me, in terms of like call to action, it's like meeting that need, right? Address that need, because that's what we're seeing loud and clear in the data. That was like the number one thing. Another interesting little tidbit on that too was we asked around this personalized experience. And what we found is the younger age cohort ranked that much higher. I mean, it was a huge gap. It was probably the biggest change we saw in this rank ordering of these questions was looking at people 60 and older, put that like dead last. Like 40% said that's not even a priority at all. It was like number last. Like you don't need to, I don't want a personalized experience, but that was a much higher driver for a younger age cohort. So in terms of like, that's just something interesting to think about too, in terms of implementing that, like the younger group using these tools more actually sees, that's one of those benefits. Personalize it to me and give me access.
Yeah. And I would just that word transparency is really at the heart of it. I think it's how do you make sure that, it's coming. People recognize, that it's already here. I mean, I think that's probably more accurate that some kind of AI is already in place. It has been for years. And people do actually appreciate, but it's the transparency of, yes, we're using it. But what does that really mean? How are we using it? What safeguards are in place? And then also, what are the benefits? And I think that's probably the biggest thing right now is transparency to make sure that people are aware that, what it is, because there's too much confusion, but it's also making sure you're clearly communicating how it's going to benefit the relationship, how you're striving to be better and using it in a positive way. Because right now there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of questions. And I think that's to overcome that, you have to be over communicating, overly transparent in a lot of ways. That doesn't mean go into technical details, but it means, how are we, you probably have lots of questions. Let us make sure that you can be confident that, we're using it the right way. And our goal is always to do this, and just making sure there's a clear and consistent answer on that, because, people oftentimes think, oh, AI is getting rid of jobs. AI is about making more money. So what is it being used for? How are we using it? How does that benefit the company? Everyone's going to acknowledge that's going to happen. But how does it help the consumer? How does it help the workforce? People care about those things. What kind of company are you? What kind of organization are you? And do I want to be working with you in the right ways?
I'd say there's a thread that runs through all of this conversation on AI and insurance, and that thread I'll address from two perspectives. The thread itself is perception management. So I think what Mark and Craig have answered thus far is managing the perceptions of consumers around how AI is interacting with them through their carrier. And the highlight for me there really is making sure the customer knows when AI is leading to a better experience. And knowing that consumers today think it's going to benefit the insurer more than them, the onus is on the insurer to make it clear that here's AI making a better insurance experience for you. Excuse me. The other facet of that I haven't heard anybody really talk about in the industry yet is what is the perception of your brand? AI, these LLMs are only learning from what's already on the web, right? So what are people saying about you? What's been written about your brand? What's been written about insurance? What's being said about insurance? And we all know that the insurance industry as a whole doesn't usually get the benefit of the doubt from media, right? And a lot of consumers will go online when they want to talk about insurance because they're complaining about insurance. So LLMs are learning certain things about insurance that may or may not be a full depiction of what the insurance experience is like. So I think that part of perception management, making sure that what is being said about your company, what's being said about the industry as a whole, that gets fed into an LLM will in the future be even more important in driving consumer perceptions, because they'll be learning that through the AI.
All right, terrific. That was a great conversation about AI and this recent research by J.D. Power. I think there's more to come here in terms of just more insights and more findings from this research, and then more research also coming. We'll include some information in the show notes about how to access J.D. Power's AI research. And Craig, Mark, Steve, want to thank you guys for joining us today.
Yep. Pleasure. Great discussion.
Thank you, guys.
Also want to thank our producers, Dan and Carolyn, and also thank our listeners as well. And we'll see you next time.